When you think about America today, it's the richest, most powerful country in history, right? But what's wild is that its rise to the top was, well, completely unexpected. Seriously, for over 100 years after it was discovered, nobody really wanted North America. It was just there. So let's get into it. Let's unpack this incredible 400-year story.
And that really is the big question here, isn't it? How on earth did this continent, a place that European powers basically wrote off as useless, become the global superpower we see today? It's an amazing story, and it's all about a crazy mix of luck, a ton of conflict, and just unbelievably rapid growth. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's right after Columbus. Spain is going all in on South and Central America, chasing all that gold and silver. But North America? It was kind of the consolation prize, a real letdown. For the big European players, the real action
Where you could just trip over a pile of gold. North America?
didn't have that, not at first. And just think about how long this letdown period actually was. We're not talking a few years here. Look at this gap. An English explorer shows up in North America way back in 1497. But does England rush to set up shop? Nope. They don't even try to start a colony until 1585. That's the famous failed Roanoke colony. It isn't until 1607 with Jamestown that they finally get a permanent settlement to stick. That's more than a century of basically ignoring the place. It's incredible. But then things changed. Once the ball got rolling, it really got rolling. After that super long pause, it was like a land rush. The scramble for the continent was on. You had the British setting up colonies up and down the East Coast. And at the same time, the French were staking a claim to this huge swath of land right down the middle. You can see where this is going, right? A collision course was set. And yep, that collision was the French and Indian War. Now, in America, we call it that, but it was really just one theater in a much bigger global conflict, the 7 Years' War. But just look at these numbers for a second, because they tell the whole story. The British colonies had over 1 million people. New France, a tiny 60,000 or so. That is a massive, massive population advantage for the British. And that right there turned out to be the game changer. So what was the result? Well, the British won. And not just by a little, they won big time. France had to hand over Canada and all of its land east of the Mississippi River. And just like that, poof, Britain was the top dog, the undisputed boss of North America. But here's the twist. Winning that war actually created a whole new set of problems for Britain. See, wars are expensive. And to pay for this one, Britain started hitting the American colonies with new taxes. Now, the colonists had just fought and died right alongside the British soldiers. So you can imagine they felt this was totally unfair. That's where we get the famous rallying cry, taxation without representation. And before you know it, the colonists were gearing up to fight their own government. And this whole chaotic period really breaks down into 4 key steps. First, you've got the revolution itself. Then, somehow, against all odds, they actually win. Victory. But winning the war didn't solve everything. In fact, their first shot at a government was, well, let's just say it was a complete mess. The whole country was on the verge of falling apart, so they had to go back to square one. And what they came up with was the Constitution, a plan for a government that, actually worked. Now, with that new, stable government in place, something incredible starts to happen. The United States begins to grow, and I mean grow at a speed that is just mind-boggling. This next part of the story, it's all about expansion, expansion, expansion. And it all kicks off with one of the biggest strokes of luck in history. Check this out. Over in Europe, Napoleon is fighting, everyone, and he's desperate for cash to fund his wars. The U.S., meanwhile, just wants to buy one little city, New Orleans, to make sure their goods can get down the Mississippi River. But Napoleon comes back with an offer that is just stunning. He basically says, forget the city, how about you buy the whole thing? And the price tag? For a chunk of land that would literally double the size of the country overnight? Just $15 million. I mean, can you even imagine? It was, without a doubt, one of the greatest real estate deals of all time. It locked down the all-important Mississippi River for trade, and it just poured gasoline on this idea of manifest destiny, this belief that America was meant to stretch all the way across the continent. And after the Louisiana Purchase, it was like the floodgates opened. The momentum was just unstoppable. Boom, Florida's acquired from Spain. Boom, American settlers in Texas break from Mexico and join the U.S. Boom, a war with Mexico adds the entire Southwest to the map. Then, a peaceful deal with Britain finally draws the northern border. I mean, think about it. In about 50 years, the United States went from being an East Coast nation to stretching all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It's just staggering. And this hunger for land, this expansionist fever, it got pretty intense. Get this. In 1856, Congress passed something called the Guano Islands Act. It's a real thing. It said that any American citizen who found an uninhabited island anywhere in the world that was covered in, well, bird droppings, could claim it for the United States. Why? Because guano was a super valuable fertilizer back then. It sounds ridiculous, but it's a perfect example of just how obsessed the country was with claiming new territory. But there's a dark side to this story, because while the nation was getting bigger and bigger on the outside, a huge, dangerous crack was forming on the inside. America had reached from sea to shining sea, sure, but it was becoming a house divided against itself. And the issue at the very heart of that conflict? Slavery. It was the one issue that couldn't be solved. In the North, more and more people saw it as a terrible evil that absolutely had to be stopped. But in the South, it was fiercely defended as a vital, important part of their economy. And you can't square that circle. Those two positions were on a collision course. The inevitable result, of course, was the Civil War. It was absolutely brutal. But when the fighting finally stopped, the North had won. The country was put back together by force, and the slaves were freed. And it settled another huge question, too. The power of the central, federal government was now cemented once and for all. So the country is back together, the borders are basically set from coast to coast. What's next? Well, now America enters this period of just explosive industrial growth. All this new economic muscle meant the country's ambitions could change. The focus wasn't just on grabbing more land anymore. Now it was about projecting American power across the oceans. And once again, this happens fast. First, Alaska gets bought from Russia for a bargain. Then, the beautiful islands of Hawaii are annexed, though not without a lot of controversy. And then, after a really quick, decisive war with Spain, the U.S. finds itself in control of places like Puerto Rico and the Philippines. This was huge. It basically marked the end of the old Spanish Empire and the beginning of a new American one. So, all of this new global power kicked off a huge new debate back home. It's a question that honestly we're still arguing about today. Should America just mind its own business and stay out of other countries' problems? Or should it actively go out and protect its own interests no matter where in the world they are? And if you want one symbol of this new global power, look no further than the Panama Canal. I mean, what an incredible feat of engineering. But it wasn't just about showing off. It served a critical military purpose. It was a shortcut. It meant America's brand new, powerful Navy could zip back and forth between the Atlantic and Pacific, projecting its power across the entire planet. So there you have it. You go from this overlooked, unwanted continent to a coast-to-coast nation, and then to a full-blown world power, all in about 400 years. And it all happens right on the eve of World War I. The speed of that rise is just staggering to think about. Which, of course, leaves us with the big, tantalizing question. What on earth was going to happen next?